Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the last video in my series of Secrets of Strixhaven Commander deck techs. I've released a new Strixhaven Commander deck every Thursday through now, when Marvel Superheroes is about to drop, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you want to see the Strixhaven decks I cooked up, take a look at the playlist in the video's description. As you see, today our commander is Muddle the Ever-Changing, an elemental summoned by a Prismari student which developed its own consciousness. The elemental, not the student. Presumably they already had one of their own. Muddle has stuck around since its creation, perusing the works of other students, like one of those videos of an elephant being led around a zoo to meet the other animals. As it discovers the traits and characteristics of other creatures that it likes, Muddle incorporates them into itself. Muddle's original form is unknown, perhaps even to itself, and it may never be finished with its self-recreation. Who would have thought that a college full of theater students would be heavy-handed with symbolism? I'm excited to show you what I put together for Muddle, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a great card and why I thought it deserved a deck of its own. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Muddle the Ever-Changing is a 3/3 legendary elemental otter shapeshifter for 2, a blue, and a red. And Muddle only has one ability, which is, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Muddle becomes a copy of up to 1 target non-legendary creature you control until end of turn, except that it has Myriad. Myriad says whenever it attacks, for each opponent other than the defending player, you can create a token copy that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control, and exile those tokens at the end of combat. So Muddle is actually sweet. We have, in our command zone, a payoff for a typical Izzet Spellslinger strategy, which makes us reevaluate that strategy almost immediately. Muddle wants us to cast spells, but instead of copying them like Aziza or Micah, both of my decks for which are linked in the video's description, we copy our coolest creature by turning Muddle into it for a turn. Then we send Muddle into combat and we get copies of our copy, thanks to its Myriad trigger. Sure, all these duplicates are short-lived, but we're here to dabble, not to commit. So our deck centers on our commander in 2 specific ways. We have a collection of creatures we can copy with Muddle, giving us rewards when those creatures enter or do combat damage, or even when they leave the battlefield. We make tokens, we burn our opponents, we remove threats, we cast free spells, and of course we draw cards. The combat damage we do is almost secondary to the pile of value we accrue on each of our combats. But that damage matters to us too, and we can't have our opponents blocking our commander and possibly taking it out no matter which creature it's currently cosplaying as. That's why the second part of our game plan is about evasion. We have a bunch of ways to make Muddle fly or become unblockable, or even just to tap down all of our opponent's creatures. Even if the effect won't be given to Muddle's Myriad copies, we still keep our elemental otter, or whatever it may be at the time, safe. Commander damage isn't always our win condition, but depending on how things play out, it's not off the table either. Best of all, it is so easy to trigger Muddle and have it transform into another of our creatures. We're running 32 instants and sorceries, as well as 5 permanent cards with instants and sorceries stapled to them in the form of adventures and omens and prepare spells. But it doesn't end there. 9 of our non-permanent spells give us another bite at the apple, either by being castable from our graveyard or even by recasting themselves, and we have 1 permanent that can repeatedly recur any of our instants and sorceries when it attacks. That's a total of 47 different ways to trigger Muddle, which means we're unlikely to ever run out of ways to give our commander a chance to try on new shapes, and, visit our opponents to show those shapes off. This deck is a ton of fun. We have endless ways to assume new identities and to find the ones that fit us best. We can always slip into that skin again if it's what makes us most comfortable, or we can change to another if our turn calls for something new. Our shifting unpredictability is certain to throw our opponents off balance, especially if they're accustomed to knowing what's being played by reading each card when it's cast and assuming it's not going to change. We make a home for ourselves in our inscrutability, not insisting that our past dictates our future, not complying with the idea that security comes only from stability. We put those who argue for immutability on mute, and we let our actions speak loudly enough to proclaim what we're about, moment by moment, turn by turn, win by win. Who we are is something to discover, not to dictate, and sharing that with our opponents is all we want to do. We are advocates for authenticity, telling them from our chest, be yourself. I will too. You'll enjoy this deck if you like a little chaos in your commander games, letting your deck offer you options as to which of your creatures will sub in as your commander, or if you like the idea of Muddle's central thesis, that persistence of self is an illusion, that we are what we do, and that those with the courage to stand up and say who they are make the world a better place. Happy Pride, everyone. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section, filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, although to be honest, our budget is quite low this time, if you have an interest in the thing that I've done here and you want to go harder with it, or if you want to kind of shift focus a little bit, maybe you want to try and clone your opponent's creatures a lot more than I have, and then have Muddle copy them since now you control those creatures yourself, that considering section is a great place to begin when you build your own Muddle the Ever-Changing deck. So, let's begin. We're going to start with the section of our game plan that is most pertinent to us, which I've called idols. All of these are creatures, or can become or make creatures, that Muddle can turn into if we were to want Muddle to do that, whenever we cast instant or sorcery. So we have a few weaker examples early on, and then we'll see the bigger ones and better ones later as we go. We start with the Dour Port Mage. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog wizard that says whenever one or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card, and for 1 and a blue and tap, we can return another target creature we control to its owner's hand. So this is not an ideal card for us to copy with Muddle, but we sure could if we wanted to. Let's pretend that we have 3 opponents, none of which have any creatures. So we cast an instant or sorcery, Muddle triggers, we copy the Dour Port Mage, now this is Muddle the Dour, let's say, and we attack opponent A. Muddle's Myriad trigger will go on the stack, and we will make an extra Dour Port Mage going at opponent B and another one going at opponent C. All of them will hit, do a point of damage, and we go to our end step, and now the Myriad delayed trigger goes off, and the copies that we created will exile themselves. What will happen then is this. Muddle, as the Dour Port Mage copy, will see 1 or more other creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, so Muddle will draw us a card. The copy that went at opponent B will see, it only triggers on other creatures, so it will see the copy that went at opponent C leave the battlefield without dying, so it will draw us a card. And the one that went at opponent C will see the one that went at opponent B leave the battlefield without dying, so it'll also draw us a card. So they all draw us a card for those reasons. So yeah, this is not an ideal thing for us to have and copy with Muddle, but it's a pretty nice inclusion in this deck. Even if we copy something else, when whatever else Muddle has become attacks, we get those Myriad copies. If the copies don't die during combat, they are going to leave the battlefield without dying because they'll be exiled at the end of combat, and the Dour Port Mage will at least draw us a card. So every turn, we're going to be drawing a card as long as we've attacked with Muddle, and at least one of our Myriad copies didn't die. So pretty nice for the Port Mage. Also, we can use it to save Muddle or any of our other creatures by paying 2 mana and tapping it to bounce that creature. This is a great way to keep Muddle safe from dying in combat, or dying from a removal effect, or even a board wipe, so that we don't have to recast Muddle for 6 mana, since Muddle is already 4, and that's not like a cheap commander. I know you're thinking 4 mana for casting Muddle plus the 2 to bounce it is 6 mana, but this will work if Muddle would have cost a commander tax of 4 or of 6 later in the game. And also, even if it's just the 2, this lets us do it over the course of multiple turns, so spreading it out is a lot better. Anyway, Dour Port Mage is a possibility for us to use as an idol, not an ideal idol, but good in the deck either way. Also, I probably should have called these idols role models, since that's what Muddle is going for. But anyway, so next up we have Idol of Oblivion, which of course is in this section because it has idol in its name. Moving on. I'm just kidding. This is 2 mana for an artifact that if we tap it, we just draw a card. Just no further cost, except that we can't activate it unless we created a token this turn. So if Muddle has attacked, assuming we have any other opponents beyond the first one, beyond the one Muddle is attacking, we're going to get at least 1 Myriad copy. which means we've created a token, so Idol of Oblivion, much like with Dour Port Mage, is likely to draw us an extra card every turn we attack with our commander, until we get down to the point where we only have one opponent. So yeah, a free extra card every turn seems pretty good for me, but it's in this section because of its second ability. If we pay 8, tap, and sack the Idol, we can make a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token, which is something that if we cast an instant or sorcery, we can target with Muddle, and now Muddle is a 10/10, and we're attacking with it, and we get myriad copies that are also 10/10s attacking. That seems pretty solid. Is it as good as being able to reliably draw a card every turn? Probably not, but late enough that we can activate this for 8 mana, maybe things will be different. So yeah, it's an option. Silent Hall Creeper is next. This is actually a solid role model or idol card for us. This is a 1/1 enchantment creature, horror, for 1 and a blue, that cannot be blocked, just inherently unblockable. Pretty great. And when it does combat damage to a player, we choose one of the following 3 that hasn't been chosen. I know you're thinking, does Muddle remember? Like if we make it into a copy of the Silent Hall Creeper and attack and choose the first one, if we do that again the next turn, can we not choose that second one again, or that first one again? We can, because the instance of Muddle's ability making it into a copy of the Silent Hall Creeper is different every time. So we can choose to draw a card, for example, every single time. There's only one difference for that, but we'll get to it. First of all, we can choose to put 2 1/1 counters on a creature, on the creature. That's great. Obviously, we can use this for the original Silent Hall Creeper, but we also probably want to use it for Muddle, because those counters persist even when Muddle is no longer a copy of the Hall Creeper, since those are modifications to it. However, if Muddle has counters on it, and we attack with Muddle and we get myriad copies, obviously those myriad copies will be created without counters on them. Since those are modifications to Muddle, they're not Muddle itself. But being able to continually pump up our commander and make it bigger and bigger and unblockable seems pretty solid to me. Not a great option for us to put on the myriad copies though, since they're going to do damage and get to have these choices. But what is a good choice for them is drawing a card. Imagine attacking one opponent with Muddle, while Muddle is the Silent Hall Creeper, getting the myriad copies, each going at a different opponent, none of them can be blocked. Muddle itself does damage and gets 2 counters, so it'll do more damage next turn. The myriad copies will do damage and draw us a card for each one. So that's us drawing 2 cards and putting 2 counters on our commander, and in addition to doing all what the combat damage that we did with it. That seems pretty great. Since they're going to be going away anyway, no reason to put counters on them, but we can draw the cards. However, the third ability is this creature becomes a copy of another target creature you control. Now, that is not always a great option for us for the myriad copies, but it sure can be. We have creatures that care about when they leave the battlefield. So if we were to change our myriad copies into an anti-causal vestige, which we'll see soon enough, then they're going to be exiled, which will leave the battlefield, which will get the anti-causal vestiges leaves the battlefield trigger for both, for each of those myriad copies. That seems pretty good to me. The one thing that's worth noting about this last ability is it does not have a time limit on it, which means if we let Muddle become a copy of the Silent Hall Creeper and then have it turn into something else, this is permanent. This does not say until end of turn. Even though Muddle has only become Silent Hall Creeper until the end of turn, this ability will sort of override Muddle's end of turn, or Muddle's until end of turn copy ability, because this does not have a time limit on it. So we probably don't want to choose this unless we just want Muddle to become something else permanently, which is maybe not the worst thing we can do, but it's not usually the best. So typically with Muddle itself, we're choosing counters or a card. With the myriad copies of Muddle, we're choosing a card or to make it into a copy of something else. And with the Silent Hall Creeper itself, we're going to choose all of them eventually. We just don't want to choose Muddle with this because Muddle is legendary. And Muddle can make a copy of something, can turn itself into a copy of something that isn't legendary, but the Hall Creeper turning itself into a copy of something, it doesn't have that proviso. It doesn't have a bit of text that says, except that creature, except it isn't legendary. So we just want to make sure we choose something that we can copy. Luckily, we only have a couple of legendary creatures in the deck other than Muddle, so making the original Silent Hall Creeper into something else is pretty nice. It does mean, however, that if we attack with the Silent Hall Creeper, we're having to choose this every time it does combat damage. So we oftentimes just want to leave it on the battlefield so that we can copy, or turn Muddle into a copy of it without losing the Silent Hall Creeper itself eventually by it becoming a copy of something else. Just something to think about. Next up, we have Encouraging Aviator. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 bird wizard with flying that says whenever it attacks, it becomes prepared. While this creature is prepared, we can cast a copy of its prepare spell, which is just jump, and if we do that, it unprepares the creature. Jump, of course, is an instant for a single blue that gives target creature flying until end of turn. So let's say we cast Encouraging Aviator, and then we cast any instant or sorcery. We cannot, of course, cast a jump yet, because jump is a prepare spell, and Encouraging Aviator doesn't become prepared until it attacks. But let's say we cast something else. Muddle could become a copy of Encouraging Aviator. Then we attack with Muddle. Muddle gets 2 attack triggers on the stack. One is its Myriad trigger, which if we let that resolve, it will make us 2 more copies of Encouraging Aviator as the Myriad tokens, assuming of course we have a total of 3 opponents. But we also get this attack trigger from Muddle, which will make Muddle prepared. So that maybe if we attacked with another creature as well, like some kind of big lumbering creature that doesn't fly, Muddle is now prepared, and before blockers, we can cast Jump off of Muddle to make that other lumbering creature a flyer until end of turn. So now we're attacking with 4 flyers. Seems good. But then we go to our next turn, and we attack with Muddle and Encouraging Aviator. We probably want Muddle to have cast an instant or sorcery before we do this, so that Muddle can gain its trigger and can become a copy of something else, because Muddle does not inherently have Myriad. So we want to be able to make sure Muddle is something else in order for it to get Myriad. But once that's happened, Muddle has its Myriad trigger on the stack, because it's a copy of something else that has Myriad, or which also has Myriad. And then we cast Jump in response to Muddle's Myriad trigger to give Muddle flying, if it wouldn't have had flying already. Muddle will get flying, that's pretty great, and its Myriad trigger will go off, and it will get copies of something else, whatever Muddle became. So that's pretty nice for us, being able to get a flying Muddle as well, or we can hold on to that Jump until the turn afterwards, because maybe we don't need Muddle to fly that time, and we can cast a Jump pre-combat to trigger Muddle and make it into something else. All of this works for us pretty well, and then the Encouraging Aviator, every time it attacks, it's going to become prepared again if it wasn't already prepared, so we're set with that trigger. And with being able to repeatedly give Muddle the ability to copy something else and to have Myriad. Next up, we have Redoubled Stormsinger. This is 2 and a red for a 3/3 Orc Wizard with First Strike that says whenever it attacks, for each creature token you control that entered this turn, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that token, and at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice those tokens. Not exile them like Myriad tokens, but sacrifice. So this is meant to work with Muddle's ability. Let's say we are not copying the Redoubled Stormsinger, we're copying something else with Muddle. We attack with Muddle and the Redoubled Stormsinger, and we have 2 triggers go on the stack. We're going to let Muddle's trigger resolve first, making its 2 Myriad copies of itself. Then Redoubled Stormsinger resolves, its ability resolves, and for each creature token we control that entered this turn, which includes those ones that just entered now, the 2 Myriad tokens, we will make an additional tapped and attacking token, copying each of those. So this sort of doubles Muddle's Myriad tokens. If we made additional tokens prior to this, we get more of those as well. But yeah, we get essentially double the tokens with Muddle. What's especially nice is that these tapped and attacking tokens are tapped and attacking, but it does not require us to attack our opponents with them, or the opponents that Muddle itself is not attacking. So if Muddle's attacking opponent A, its Myriad trigger is going to give us a copy of it that's attacking opponent B, and another that's attacking opponent C. Redoubled Stormsinger will make copies of those 2 that could be attacking whomever we want. We could send them both at opponent A if we want to, or both of them at opponent C. Just give them a worse day. So yeah, But then what if we've cast a spell with Muddle, or with Muddle in play and Redoubled Stormsinger in play, and we've made Muddle into a copy of Redoubled Stormsinger. We attack with Muddle, and we get 2 triggers. Both of them are attack triggers. We let, again, Muddle's Myriad trigger resolve first. So now Muddle is attacking opponent A. We, as a 3/3 first strike, of course, we will get an additional one attacking opponent B or one of their planeswalkers, and another attacking opponent C and one of their planeswalkers. Then Muddle's Redoubled Stormsinger trigger will resolve, and we get additional tokens, at least one for each of those Myriad tokens we made. And those tokens can be sent at whomever we wish. They could go with the original Muddle at opponent A. They could all go at opponent C or opponent B. Or we could just say, rather than opponent B getting 1 token and opponent C getting 1, we're going to give 2 of them to each. Both will get a Myriad token and both will get a Redoubled Stormsinger token. So yeah, a nice way to sort of simulate doubling Myriad, or give double Myriad if you want to think of it that way. Next up is Parapet Thrasher. This is 2 and double red for a 4/3 dragon with flying that says, whenever one or more dragons you control deal combat damage to an opponent, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. So we can do the same one every turn. It's destroy target artifact that opponent controls. This creature deals 4 damage to each other opponent, or exile the top card of your library and you can play it this turn. So notably, it's only this turn, so we're going to have to do it either during combat or during our post-main or during our end step, but it does say play. So if we haven't made a land drop yet and we exile the top card of our library and it is a land, we can play it as our land drop. Pretty nice. We just have to wait until our second main. So what's especially cool about this is, let's say we attack with Muddle when Muddle has become a Parapet Thrasher. We're going to get Myriad copies. So Muddle is going at opponent A, and we've got another Parapet Thrasher going at opponent B and another at opponent C. And then, let's say they all do damage. Well, all of them are going to see 1 or more dragons do combat damage to an opponent. So Muddle will trigger, and then both other Parapet Thrashers will trigger as well, and the original one will trigger, because it doesn't have to have done the damage itself. It just needs to know that we have 1 or more dragons dealing combat damage to an opponent. But notably, it's an opponent. So this is actually going to give us a trigger for each of our dragons that did damage to an opponent, because it's 1 or more dragons, but Myriad doesn't let us send our dragons, our Myriad tokens, at the same opponent that our original is going at, or as each other. So for each opponent that has 1 or more dragons deal combat damage to it, we're going to get a trigger from each of our dragons. I know this sounds crazy, but just go with me. Let's pretend for some reason Muddle has become a copy of Parapet Thrasher, and we're attacking opponent A. We get a Myriad token going at opponent B and a Myriad token going at opponent C, and we also have the original Parapet Thrasher going at opponent C. What's going to happen is, assuming none of them are blocked, opponent A is going to have 1 or more dragons deal combat damage to it, which means all 4 of our dragons are going to see that and trigger. Opponent B is going to have a dragon deal damage to it, which means all 4 of our dragons are going to trigger again because an opponent was dealt combat damage by 1 or more dragons. And then opponent C is going to be hit by 2 dragons, a Myriad copy and the original Parapet Thrasher. And so each dragon's going to trigger a 3rd time, but not a 4th time, because that's 1 or more dragons doing combat damage to the same opponent. So basically, we can only get as many triggers as the number of opponents we have, but every one of our dragons is going to get that same number of triggers, including any of our dragons that happen to die in the process. For example, if we somehow have let's think about it. Let's say somehow we have Trample, and we have a opponent blocking with a flying 3/3. We're going to do 1 point of damage, trampling over to that opponent, so it will do combat damage to an opponent, but it will die in the process. But it will see itself do that damage, and it will see any other dragons do damage at the same time. So the dragons don't even have to survive this in order to get their triggers. However, each dragon gets to choose one of these that hasn't been chosen this turn, which means if we have Muddle and its Myriad copies, all as Parapet Thrashers, do combat damage to different opponents, then each Parapet Thrasher is going to get 3 different triggers, and they're going to have to choose a different thing each time. But what that means is, every dragon is going to blow up an artifact, every dragon is going to deal 4 damage to each other opponent, and every dragon is going to exile the top part of our library and give us permission to play it this turn. So we're essentially, assuming the original Parapet Thrashers attacking as well, we're going to put 4 cards in exile we can play. We're going to do a total of 4 damage per dragon to each other opponent, and we're going to blow up 4 artifacts. That seems good. So Muddle hitting is going to have our other 3 dragons do 4 damage to opponent B and 4 damage to opponent C, which is 12 damage to B and 12 to C. Then the same is going to happen for opponent B, because they also had a dragon do combat damage to them. So Muddle and the Parapet Thrasher and the Myriad token that went at opponent C are all going to do 4 damage, so it's 12 more damage, and so forth. So yeah, the opponent C will have been hit by these dragons. So that means opponents A and B are going to get dealt damage. You see how it goes. Like, it's a lot of damage being spread around. This is a huge amount of burn when we're doing this with Myriad, blowing up all these artifacts. Obviously, we don't blow up an artifact if we can't. But yeah, this is going to give us quite a lot of value at the table. It is annoying to have to figure it all out, but it's annoying that we have so much good things, so many good things going on. So it's one of those, my lobster is too buttery, my steak is too juicy sort of situations. Next up is Pyrogoyf, a classic, in the sense that it came out in Modern Horizons 3 Commander. It's 3 in a red for a star/1+star Lurgoyf. It has power equal to the number of card types among cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is 1 more than that. So it starts off as a 0/1 if there's no cards in any graveyards. But as long as there are any cards in any graveyards, Pyrogoyf is going to have a power equal to the number of types among all graveyards, and its toughness will be 1 more. And whenever it or another Lurgoyf we control enters, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So we play Pyrogoyf, and it's going to do damage equal to its power to any target. Any target means players, planeswalkers, creatures, battles if there are any. That's fine. But if we make Muddle into a copy of this, and then we attack with it, we're going to have 2 more Pyrogoyfs come in as the Myriad copies. That will trigger the Lurgoyf, the original Muddle Pyrogoyf, twice. Once for each of the token copies. Muddle will see each of those copies come in, and will make each of those copies do damage equal to its power to any target. So that's 2 triggers for Muddle. However, both of those copies see themselves and the other Myriad token come in as well. So that's a total of 6 triggers, 2 for each of the Pyrogoyfs, Muddle and each of the 2 Myriad tokens. And so it's only the Myriad tokens doing the damage, but each Myriad token is doing damage 3 times, since there are 3 total Pyrogoyfs triggering to make it do that damage. So if, let's say it's a 2/3, both of the new Pyrogoyfs are going to do a total of 6 damage in the form of 2 damage 3 times, for a total of 12 damage if we want to send it all at one opponent, or at 1 creature. Yeah, so this can give us a lot of damage, especially if our Pyrogoyfs are bigger than 2/3s. Because if Muddle is a copy of the Pyrogoyf, that means we've got at least 1 instant or sorcery probably in our graveyard, as long as we didn't, only have 1 left and we flashed it back and now we have none. So that puts more types in our graveyard, which gives us more power on our Pyrogoyf. This, much like our Parapet Thrasher, this is not quite as complicated as the Parapet Thrasher, but it can do quite a bit of damage for us, especially since that example I just gave with each of the new Myriad Lurgoyfs doing 6 damage doesn't include the fact that the original Pyrogoyf is probably also still in play this turn, so we're getting even more triggers. Yeah, lots of fun. Rite of Replication is next. There's a reason this is in this section. 2 in double blue for a sorcery with kicker of 5 generic mana, meaning we can pay a total of 7 in double blue and it is kicked. it's 2 and double blue normally to make a token that's a copy of target creature, but if we kicked it, we make 5 of those tokens instead. So this is pretty solid. It gives us the ability to make a copy of Muddle if we want to, and then we just lose all of the copies that we made because Muddle is legendary, unless Muddle is a copy of something else that is not legendary, and then we have that legendary version of Muddle, but with Myriad. And those get to stick around. So for example, let's say we cast Rite of Replication. Muddle becomes, Muddle's gonna trigger with Rite of Replication on the stack and become a copy of, we'll say, Pyroglyph. Muddle's ability resolves. Muddle is a Pyroglyph with Myriad. Now Rite of Replication resolves and we make a copy that is a Pyroglyph with Myriad, because that Myriad becomes part of the copyable qualities of the creature. If we kicked this, we now have not just one new Pyroglyph with Myriad, we have 5 of them. And so all of them are going to trigger whenever we attack with, right away, as soon as they come in, of course, as will Muddle, as will the original Pyroglyph. But then we attack with Muddle, we get 2 more Pyroglyphs that come in. Muddle, the original, and all the copies are going to see that, as well as those 2 new ones will see each other, and that's a huge amount of damage. So Rite of Replication, very powerful for us when it comes to giving us more copies of our creatures, especially if we take advantage of the fact that Muddle can be targeted with Rite of Replication, will trigger and resolve, becoming a copy of something else with Myriad, and then Rite of Replication, if we're copying Muddle, will make us 1 or 5 tokens that are copies of whatever Muddle has become, but with Myriad. And those stick around as opposed to the Myriad tokens. All of that is fine. But the reason this is in this section is because it does not say make a token that's a copy of target creature you control. We can use Rite of Replication for 4 mana or 9 mana to make 1 or 5 copies of a creature that an opponent controls. And if it's non-legendary, then it's something that we can copy with Muddle as well. That's why it's in this idle section, because Rite of Replication can make us 1, or again, 5 copies of an opponent's creature. As long as it's non-legendary, that's something we can copy with Muddle and make even more of it with Myriad. So yeah, if an opponent has some kind of, I don't know, maybe they're running a weird Stifle Knot commander deck. They've got a Phyrexian Dreadnought, an 11/11 trampling artifact creature. We kick Rite of Replication, we make 5 of those. Or we just cast it regularly and we make 1 of them. And then, as long as we cast another spell after we have that new Phyrexian Dreadnought into play, we have Muddle become a copy of our token copy of the Phyrexian Dreadnought. It's not legendary, so Muddle is now an 11/11 Trampler with Myriad. Until end of turn at least, we attack with Muddle. Now there's a Phyrexian Dreadnought going at every opponent. What if we did this with a Wormcoil Engine? Wormcoil Engine, that seems like a great choice, especially if we kick Rite of Replication. Anyway, this is just such a cool card in Commander. It's great in this deck. It lets us do a number of different things by doing it in different orders and being able to copy our opponent's stuff. Love it. Next up, we've got Stormkiln Artist. This is another card that's not a terrific idol or role model for our commander to copy, but we sure can get a lot of value out of it even when we do. So 3 and a red gives us a 2/2 Dwarf Shaman that gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control. So it sort of has cranial plating in a way. Yeah, and it has a Magecraft ability. Whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, we make a treasure token. So notably, we're casting things all the time in this deck in order to trigger Muddle. And getting treasures from it is sort of like giving ourselves a rebate on those spells. If we make Muddle into a Stormkiln Artist, then we've at least gotten 1 treasure token, since in order to make Muddle into a copy of the Stormkiln Artist, we will have had to cast an instant or sorcery, which would have triggered the Stormkiln Artist. So that means Muddle is at least a 3/2, since it's a 2/2 getting +1/+0 for that treasure token. Then we attack with Muddle, and Muddle gives us 2 Myriad tokens attacking as well. Let's say we cast an additional instant at that moment. All of our Stormkiln Artists are going to trigger the original, Muddle, and the 2 Myriad tokens, which means a total of an additional 4 treasures are going to enter, which means now all of our attackers are 7/2s. That can be an enormous amount of damage, especially because if we've got extra instants in our hand, we might as well cast them again with those treasures that we've made. Yes, we lose some power from that, but we're going to get even more power back since we've got 4 Stormkiln artists in play. So yeah, not the perfect option for Muddle to copy, but it can sure give us a lot of value when we do that with it, and if Muddle happens to die in the process, we've probably done a bunch of damage over the course of that process and made a bunch of more additional treasures that we can use to recast Muddle right away. Pretty good. Even if not, Stormkiln Artist is a great choice in this deck with, at the very least, 32 instants and sorceries in our library to keep giving us acceleration. Yeah. But if we want even more treasures in the form of dragons, how about Goldlust Triad? 4 and a red for a 4/3 dragon with flying, and it just has Myriad. And it says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, we make a treasure token. So normally, this is a 4/3 flyer for 5, that when we attack one opponent, we're attacking every opponent, and as long as any opponent gets dealt damage, we're going to make a treasure. If all of our opponents get dealt damage, we're going to make a number of treasures equal to the opponents that we dealt damage to. But this is especially nice with Muddle, because if we get the Goldlust Triad in play, and then we cast an instant or sorcery and use Muddle to make a copy of Goldlust Triad, that copy is the same as Goldlust Triad, except it has Myriad, which means to say, it has Myriad twice. So if we use Muddle as the Goldlust Triad to attack opponent A, it's going to have 2 Myriad triggers, making a second Goldlust Triad for opponent B and another one for opponent C, and then doing that again. So we're going to have a total of 5 dragons flying in for a total of 20 damage in the air, assuming there's no blockers. 4 of it's going to be from Muddle, which is commander damage, going to opponent A. 8 is going to be for opponent B, and 8 for opponent C. And then all of those are going to trigger, and we're going to have 5 treasure tokens, which is the same amount that it costs to cast the Goldlust Triad in the first place. So it's an evasive, high-powered, treasure-making creature we copy with our commander that will give us even more copies, myriad-wise, than our commander would anyway. Great. Next up is Illithid Harvester. I love this card. This is from Battle for Baldur's Gate. It is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 horror with Ceramorphosis. When this creature enters, turn any number of target tapped non-token creatures face down. They are 2/2 horror creatures. What this means is, when this thing comes in, if any of our opponents have tapped creatures, those creatures are now bears. We turn them face down, and they are 2/2 horrors. They lack all of their abilities that they had before. They're just 2/2 horrors. They don't have names, they don't have colors, nothing is true about them except the fact that they are 2/2s, and their type is horror. Their creature type, that is. They still have any counters they had on them, or any, auras attached to them, or equipment attached to them, but that's all they are. We've essentially humbled every tapped non-token creature that our opponents have. We don't have to hit all of them, but we sure can. So this is pretty sweet if our opponents have tapped down their creatures somehow when this comes in. And if we make a copy of this, if we copy it with Muddle, Muddle becoming the Illithid Harvester doesn't cause this to happen because Muddle's already in play. But the moment we attack with Muddle, it will have Myriad. We will make additional Illithid Harvesters, both of which will do the Ceramorphosis thing. So anything that's tapped at this point now is also going to become a 2/2 horror. These are not morphed or disguised or anything, so they can't be flipped back over. They just have to die if our opponents want to get them back somehow. This includes their commanders. If someone's commander is tapped, it's now a vanilla 2/2 horror creature. They've got to get it killed somehow if they want to be able to put it back in the command zone and recast it and get its abilities back. Very, very powerful, this broad humble effect. But how do we ensure that those creatures are tapped? Well, Illithid Harvester is an adventure creature. It has an adventure on it, a sorcery called Plant Tadpoles. The way this works is, when this is in your hand, you can cast it either as the Illithid Harvester, which means you just ignore the adventure, or you can cast it as the adventure, and then the whole spell, the whole card, goes to exile as it resolves, and you can cast the creature half of it from exile later. It can be on the same turn if you've got the mana for it, but just afterwards. So you can either send it on an adventure and then have it visit the board, or you can just play it. Once it's in play, you cannot cast the adventure unless you somehow get the card back in your hand in order to cast the Adventure from there. But the Adventure is Plant Tadpoles. X and double blue for a sorcery that taps X target creatures and causes them not to untap during their controller's next untap step. So, it's not a stun counter, but it's kind of like one. So we say double blue and tap down all the important creatures on the battlefield that we're able to target. We go a turn cycle. They're not going to untap during those untap steps. So on our next turn, we cast Illithid Harvester. Ceramorphosis goes off. All of those creatures that are tapped, as well as any creatures that became tapped otherwise, we can make them into just vanilla 2/2 horrors. Those are still tapped. The only thing we can't hit with this are token creatures. Notably, we can hit our own creatures with this. I don't know why we would, but we sure can. So yeah, Illithid's Harvester is very nice for us, especially since we can repeatedly do this whenever we make Muddle into a copy of Illithid Harvester, and then attack with Muddle and get our enters triggers from those myriad tokens. Notably as well, and I think I was pretty clear with this at the start of the video, but this is a sorcery, which means if we cast this, just like if we cast Jump off of our Prepare creature we saw earlier, this is going to trigger Muddle. So yeah, pretty nice. Next up is Renegade Bull. This is our way of recurring spells from our graveyard, and it's just fun in this deck. This is a 4 and a red 0/5 Ox with Trample, that whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. This does not have to be before combat. So let's say this is in play, and we cast Jump off of our Prepare creature earlier. We make Muddle into a copy of Renegade Bull, we attack with it, we get 2 extra copies of Renegade Bull, our myriad tokens. Now we're attacking with 3 0/5s, even though the original one is technically a 1/5, since it triggered off of us casting that 1 mana spell Jump. But we're attacking with Muddle and the 2 myriad copies, and they are all 0/5s. Then, mid-combat, we cast another instant, that's a 2 mana instant. All of our Renegade Bulls are going to get +2/+0. So the original will become a 3/5, so 1 plus the 2, and Muddle and the other 2 copies will become 2/5s. So that's how we get power onto these things. And whenever it attacks, we exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from our graveyard and copy it, and we may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. We have to do that right away. However, this is an attack trigger. So if we cast something, Renegade Bull is in play and so is Muddle, we cast any instant or sorcery, Renegade Bull itself is going to get this power boost, but Muddle is going to become a copy of Renegade Bull if we choose for it to. Then we attack with both. Muddle is going to have 2 attack triggers, this one and its Myriad trigger. We let the Myriad trigger resolve first. Now we have 4 Renegade Bulls attacking. The original, Muddle, and the 2 Myriad copies. The Myriad copies are going at players that are not the same as each other or as what Muddle's going at, but the original could be going at anyone. And Muddle and the original have these other attack triggers, which we let resolve after we've made the Myriad copies. We will exile an instant or sorcery from our graveyard, copy it, and cast the copy without paying its mana cost, which will trigger the original, Muddle, and the other 2 for each of these spells that we exile, since we're getting 1 from the original and 1 from Muddle. So we're going to get probably, maybe not a huge amount, but these might become 5/5 tramplers. Now we've got 20 damage going at our opponents, and some of that is commander damage. Neat. This just seems like a fun include in our deck. Next up, we have Subterfuge from the commander product for Lorwyn Eclipsed. This is 4 and a blue for a 3/5 elemental incarnation that says when it enters, target creature gains flying, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards until end of turn. So we have this come in, we find a way to make Muddle a copy of it, we attack with Muddle. Muddle is going to make 2 Myriad tokens, assuming again 3 opponents. Those creatures are going to be able to target each other or Muddle. So we target Muddle with it. Muddle is going to become a 3/5 flyer that when it does combat damage to a player will draw as many cards as we did damage. So if Muddle is attacking someone that doesn't have any flying blockers or reach blockers, Muddle's going to draw us 3 cards when it does damage, as well as not be blocked. And let's say that that was the first of the 2 Myriad tokens that targeted Muddle. We'll have the other one target the first one. So now it's attacking a different opponent, which again, if they don't have any flying blockers or reach blockers, it's going to do damage, and we're going to draw even more cards. So yeah, Subterfuge is a great way for us to give Muddle flying, as well as give flying to one of our other tokens. Or if we attack with Subterfuge and Muddle, while Muddle is a Subterfuge, then we can have the Myriad tokens give flying and this kind of super curiosity effect to Muddle and the original Subterfuge. And if the copies happen to hit anyway, then we'll draw cards. We won't draw cards off of them because they don't have this ability inherently. Neither do they have flying, but we'll still be able to do, some solid damage, assuming we hit. And Subterfuge has Encore for 7 and double blue, which means while it's in our graveyard, we can pay 7 and double blue, and for each opponent, we make a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. Those copies gain haste, we have to sacrifice them at the end step, and we activate this only at sorcery speed. So kind of, this is like one last shot at Myriad inherently. It's not quite the same as Myriad because they sacrifice and, so forth. But for 9 mana, that is a lot, admittedly, we have Subterfuge come back from the graveyard. We get 3 Subterfuges, assuming we have 3 opponents. All of them attack different opponents. And if we cast anything, even like a 1-mana spell after we did that, well then Muddle can become a copy of one of our Subterfuges, and we'll get even more copies when Muddle attacks. All of them attack, and we can have them, well, rather, when they enter, we can have them all give flying to each other. There's only going to be one thing that ends up without flying, and without this draw effect. So yeah, pretty nice. Next we have Anticausal Vestige. I mentioned this earlier. 6 generic mana for a 7/5 Eldrazi that says when it leaves the battlefield. Does not say it has to die. It can just leave the battlefield because, for example, it's been bounced, or it's been tucked in our graveyard, or in our library, or because it was a Myriad copy that is being exiled at the end of combat. No matter how, when it leaves the graveyard, we draw a card, and then we may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control from our hand onto the battlefield. This includes lands, because lands have a mana value of 0. So if we have a land in hand, we can put it directly into play. It does come in tapped, but it is a little bit of acceleration for us if we want to look at it that way. We can also warp this in for 4 generic mana, meaning if we want to not pay 6, we can pay 4 for it. It will come in, and then at the end step, we will exile it, and we can cast it for its regular casting cost on a later turn. Which means for 4 mana, we get it to come in. It's a 7/5 that just hangs out for a little bit, and at the end step, we will get this trigger as it leaves the battlefield and goes to exile, and we can cast it for 6 and bring it in normally on a later turn. But what's especially nice about this is if we cast it for 4, we warp it in, we can then cast any instant or sorcery, have Muddle become a copy of this, attack with Muddle, and we get the Myriad copies. So now we're attacking each opponent with a 7/5. One of them is our commander. The other 2, as long as they leave the battlefield in any way, whether they're blocked or destroyed or just allowed to go to the end of combat when we exile them, we're going to get this trigger off of both of those. And then, at the end of turn, since we warped in the original Anticausal Vestige, it's also going to give us that trigger as it goes to exile too. Pretty great. Next up is our Combustible Gear Hulk. This is 4 and double red for a 6/6 artifact creature construct with First Strike. So already pretty great for us to be able to copy with our commander, or make our commander into a copy of. And it says when this creature enters, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. And if they don't, we mill 3 cards, and this creature deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. So in our deck, that may not be a lot of damage, but if we've got a Combustible Gear Hulk in play, our opponents have a good reason to think that we've got some expensive cards in our deck. So they might let us draw 3 cards when this first comes in. And if they don't, we're putting cards in our graveyard that we can recur in several different ways, which we'll see a little later on, and doing damage directly to that player based on the total mana value of those cards. But especially nice is being able to cast a spell once this is in play, turn Muddle into a copy of it, and attack with it. We get Myriad copies. Both Gear Hulks are going to enter, and maybe draw us 3 cards. So we might draw 6 cards from just attacking with 3 6/6 First Strikes. And any player who we target with these that doesn't want us to draw 3 cards has us mill and just immediately take burn damage. We don't even have to target an opponent with this effect. That's the same opponent that that particular Gear Hulk is attacking. we can attack opponent A with Muddle, get a Gear Hulk for opponents B and C, and have the enters trigger from both of those myriad Gear Hulks target opponent A. So we just make opponent A have to take an awful lot of damage, or we just do the opponent who's got the least amount of life, which more likely guarantees us to be able to draw those cards. Pretty good either way. Next we have Meringue River Regent, which is currently being played in Standard in a really annoying deck, but it's a good one. So this is a 4 and double blue, 6/7 dragon with flying that when it enters, we return up to 2 other target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So you can see where this is going. We cast the dragon, we bounce a couple things, we cast a spell, we make Muddle into a copy of the dragon, we attack with the dragon, we get 2 more dragons, each of which will bounce 2 things. And I want to make mention, this is a dragon. We've already seen Goldless Triad as a dragon, but we've seen Parapet Thrasher, which cares about us doing damage with 1 or more dragons. So we have a tiny little dragon sub-theme in this deck. Parapet Thrasher can be really nice for us, even if we're not copying it, but rather copying like the Meringue River Regent or the Goldless Triad. So this is a very powerful effect that gets rid of things. They are non-land permanents. They don't even have to be creatures. So we can get rid of an opponent's, Panharmonicon, or their Doubling Season, whatever it may be that's dangerous for us. We can get rid of one of their Planeswalkers if we really want to. But oftentimes what we want to do is get rid of whatever could block us, because removing permanents is the same thing as evasion if those permanents could have been blockers. So yeah, Meringue River Regent, as if Muddle is wearing this skin, we're going to attack with Muddle and bounce 4 things, all of which could be on the board of whomever Muddle is attacking, so that we have Muddle hit for 6 commander damage in the air, and hopefully the other 2 hit for 6 regular damage in the air against the other 2 opponents. But that's not the end of Meringue River Regent. It has an Omen, which is sort of like an adventure, but rather than casting an Omen and then putting the card into exile and letting us cast the creature from exile afterwards, the way that adventures work, with an Omen, we cast the Omen and then we shuffle this card back into our library. So sort of it is a modal card in a way that adventures kind of are as well, but we don't get like 1 bite and then the second one or just the second one. We get either 1 bite or the second one. And if we take the 1 bite, that second one's going to go away, but we have access to get to it again if we happen to draw it. And if we do, we could cast that Omen again and shuffle it back in a second time. It's pretty neat. Tarkir Dragonstorm gave us a cool option with this. In any case, Coil and Catch is 3 and a blue for an instant speed Omen that lets us draw 3 cards and then discard a card. So we have a few different ways to put cards in our graveyard in this deck, and some ways that we're able to get value out of that, as we've already seen from some of our recursive abilities like Renegade Bull, but we've also got other ways to do that too. In any case, the River Regent gives us a great option. At instant speed, we can make a copy, make our commander into a copy of something else that we already have by drawing 3 and discarding a card, then we shuffle this away. Or, if we're willing to wait a little bit, we can cast this for 6. And now we've bounced 2 things to give us time to be able to cast an instant or sorcery, to turn Muddle into a copy of this dragon, to make more copies of the dragon when we attack with Myriad. Very nice. Next up, we have the Trumpeting Carnosaur. Love this one from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. This is 4 and double red for a 7/6 dinosaur with trample that says when it enters, we discover 5. Discover is like a fixed version, quote unquote, of Cascade. What this means is we exile cards from the top of our library until we find a non-land mana value 5 or less. We can either cast that spell as part of the resolution of the Discover ability, or we can put it in our hand, and everything else we exiled goes in the bottom of our library, in random order, I believe. So, pretty neat. Trumpeting Carnosaur gives us a free spell. It may be a spell that we want to cast, it may not, but either way, we can put it in our hand or put it on the bottom of our library, but essentially this draws us a card or casts a free spell when it enters, and it leaves behind a 7/6 trampling body. So of course, if we cast a spell, when this enters, we cast an instant or sorcery, which may be what we discovered into, Muddle can become a copy of the Carnosaur. We attack with Muddle, we get 2 myriad copies of the Carnosaur, both of which will discover 5 since they've entered, and then we've got a 7/6 trampler attacking each opponent. One of them which is doing commander damage because it's just Muddle. So yeah, Trumpeting Carnosaur is a great thing for us to copy. But if we happen to pull this in a time where we just really need removal, it also essentially has a channel ability. Instead of casting the Carnosaur, we can pay 2 in a red and discard the Carnosaur to have it do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. This is a very sad use for the Carnosaur in this deck when we want to be able to get repeated value out of it. But if you need removal, and it's nice to have an option for it. Next, we have Mere Battlesphere. There are several different versions of this kind of card now, like Rolling Hamsphere, or there is a Lost Caverns of Ixalan one that the name of it is escaping me right now, but it makes gnomes. You know, it's another 7-mana artifact. But in any case, I think the original, what is essentially the original, the Battlesphere, is the best option for us. This is a 4/7 artifact creature Mere Construct for 7 mana. 7 mana is a lot, but when it enters, it makes 4 1/1 colorless Mere artifact creature tokens. So for 7 mana, we're not getting a 4/7. We're getting a 4/7 and 4 1/1s. We're getting 5 creatures. That's, if you play Hornet Queen is 7 and gives you 5 creatures. None of these fly or have Death Touch. But what they do have is this. When the Battlesphere attacks, we can tap any number of untapped Mere we control, and if we do, the Battlesphere gets a power bonus equal to the number of Mere we tapped, and it does that much damage to the player or planeswalker that it's attacking. So it's free burn, it's free pump. Usually this is attacking as an 8/7, since we're tapping all 4 of those Mere to give it +4/+0 and do 4 damage to that player or planeswalker we're attacking. But that's not the end of it in this deck. Oh no. Because let's say we get the Battlesphere out and then we cast a 1-mana spell, an instant or sorcery. Muddle becomes a copy of the Battlesphere. Muddle doesn't enter, Muddle's already in play, so we don't make any Mere. But when Muddle attacks, Muddle will get 2 attack triggers. This one and its Myriad trigger. So we let the Myriad trigger resolve first. Those Battlespheres enter tapped and attacking, so they do not get their own attack trigger, but they do get their enters trigger, meaning they will both make 4 Mere. We now have 12 Mere in play, 4 for each of the 2 Myriad copies, and 4 from the original Battlesphere that Muddle is copying. Then, Muddle has this attack trigger resolve. We may tap all of our Mere, which is 12. Muddle becomes a 16/7, doing 12 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. That's enormous. And then those Myriad tokens go away, but the Mere that they created stay behind. So that next turn, we can do this all over again and tap a total of 20 Mere and be attacking with a 20/7 commander that does 20 straight up damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So yeah, if we did not do that, maybe if Muddle happens to die in the process, which good luck, it's got a 7 toughness at this point, but maybe it does, we've still got the original Mere Battlesphere, and now we've got 12 Mere sitting on the battlefield that we can attack this with this, and it's a 16/7 that's doing 12 damage. Yeah, love it. Finally, we have another Edge of Eternity's card. It's Starwinder. This is a 7/7 Leviathan for 5 and double blue that says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. Just super curiosity. It's not just a creature doing combat damage, draw a card. It's that many cards. That is the amount of damage it dealt. So if we copy this with Muddle, and we attack with Muddle and we get our Myriad tokens, if all of them do damage, if all of them do 7 damage to different opponents, then that means all of them are going to trigger off of each other and off of themselves and each other, basically. So we're going to absolutely mill ourselves to death because original Muddle will trigger once for itself and once for each of those other Myriad tokens, drawing us a total of 21 cards. The other 2 will do the same, so we've now drawn 63 cards. Probably not a great idea, but pretty nice for us to be able to do. Starwinder just sitting on our battlefield, being able to hang out when we are attacking with a bunch of creatures thanks to Muddle, is going to draw us a bunch of cards. But yeah, this can be a pretty dangerous situation for us. However, we can also warp it in for 2 and double blue. So we get this to come in, we spend 1 spell to have Muddle become a copy of this. We attack with Muddle. Hopefully, we are blocked in some places, and if we are, that's fine because it's a 7/7. But if any of them get in, then we're drawing a whole lot of cards, probably 21 cards, which means a good fifth of our library is now in our hand, and we can discard down to whatever it may be that has the best 7 cards that we have of that 20%. So yeah, Starwinder is a big, very splashy effect. As I've often said, I like to have a couple of cards in my libraries that, change the texture of the way the game plays. Starwinder is definitely that for us. So that covers our idols section. Let's go now to our other big part of our game plan, which is all these ways we can be evasive. Many of these are instants and sorceries. So these are all, as you can see, there's 10 cards right here that are, technically Jailbreak Scheme is not a 1-drop, but there's 11 cards right here that are all 1-drop instants and sorceries, all of which give some kind of evasion, and all of which trigger Muddle to make Muddle into a copy of some other non-legendary creature we have. So for example, Artful Dodge. This is a single blue for a sorcery that makes target creature unblockable this turn, and it has flashback for a single blue. So this is technically 2 different instances of us being able to trigger Muddle. Once from our hand, once from our graveyard. Unblockable, hard to beat that. Sounds good. Defy Gravity is next. Another single blue, but this is an instant, and it gives the creature flying until end of turn, and has flashback for a single blue. So it's the same as Artful Dodge. It is not unblockable, it's flying, but a lot of times flying is unblockable, depending on what our opponents have, and it happens at instant speed. So that's great. Something we really haven't talked about. If we use an instant to make Muddle into something else, we can do that on an opponent's turn, even though we're not going to take advantage of whatever kind of myriad we have. We can still turn Muddle into a Starwinder, and suddenly we have an additional 7/7 blocker that maybe even flies. Pretty good. Distortion Strike comes next. This is another single blue sorcery, gives target creature +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked. And it has Rebound, meaning if we cast it from our hand, we exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast it for free from exile. Pretty great. So this is similar to the last 2, but rather than having to pay to flash them back, Distortion Strike gives this to us at the start of our turn. So if we already have a creature in play that we want to have Muddle become a copy of, we can just Distortion Strike on Muddle, trigger Muddle. Muddle is going to get to become a copy of that creature. Then it's going to get +1/+0 and unblockable, and we can go straight to combat from there if we want. I do want to make mention, like I said earlier, all of these that we've seen so far that give unblockable, or this +1/+0, or flying, or whatever, these are not going to affect whatever copies Muddle makes with its Myriad trigger. Muddle is getting +1/+0 and unblockable. Those Myriad copies are just copies of what Muddle is printed to be. So yeah, we're not getting to share the wealth with these, but all we're trying to do is inexpensively trigger Muddle and give Muddle the ability to be protected and hopefully to do better commander damage by making it unblockable or flying or otherwise evasive. Enter the Enigma, a more recent Duskworn card. It is a sorcery speed, single blue mana spell that makes target creature unblockable, but also draws us a card. So rather than being able to be flashed back, Enter the Enigma replaces itself in a different way. Drawing a card off of this is pretty nice. Jailbreak Scheme is next. This is not actually a single blue because it is a sorcery with Spree. Spree means we have to choose one or more of these other additional costs, but we can choose all of them if we want. So Jailbreak Scheme for a blue and 3 lets us put a 1/1 counter on target creature and it can't be blocked this turn. So that's 4 mana for kind of the same effect as Distortion Strike, but at least that counter sticks around, and that's pretty nice. Or we can pay a blue and 2, and target artifact or creature's owner puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library, meaning this is a removal spell for 3 mana that tucks something. Normally, the sort of blue sorcery speed, put it on the top of or bottom of the owner's library, costs 4 mana. So this is a little bit cheaper for a total of 3, and it can hit artifacts as well. Not horrible. Or if we want, we can pay 6 mana. A total of 5 and a blue, and we can do both of these. So yeah, good flexibility here. It's not incredibly powerful, but it does trigger our commander. It does make our commander unblockable. Yeah, it helps us out. Leap is next. Classic from Stronghold. Single blue for an instant. Target creature gains flying until end of turn. Draw a card. So this is the same as Enter the Enigma, but it's got the similar thing to Defy Gravity and Artful Dodge. Instead of giving unblockable, it gives flying, but it's instant speed rather than sorcery speed. Pretty good. Maximize Altitude is next from Guilds of Ravnica. A single blue for a sorcery that gives the creature +1/+1 and flying until end of turn. +1/+1, not a counter, just a nice little bump. And it has Jumpstart, which is not the same as the product, which has no hyphen in it. This is a form of flashback. We can cast it from our graveyard if we discard a card in addition to paying its other cost, and then we exile it. So it basically says, flash it back with the additional cost of discarding a card. It's fine. We can turn any card in our hand, essentially, into a second copy of Maximize Altitude. Maybe we don't need a land. We can just make our commander a little bit bigger and fly. Pretty good. Plus, of course, triggering our commander's ability. Pim Particles is next. This is from the most recent set. It's coming out right now, and I'm going to be starting next week, releasing my Marvel Superheroes commander decks every Thursday. Pim Particles is a single blue for a sorcery that says target creature gains vigilance until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn, and draw a card. So, very similar to Enter the Enigma, but it also gives them vigilance. It's a strict upgrade, seems like. Yeah, neat. Okay, next up, we have Shadow Rift. Shadow Rift is a very old one from Tempest. This is a single blue for an instant that gives the target creature Shadow until end of turn. Shadow is an old mechanic that says creatures with Shadow can only block or be blocked by other creatures with Shadow. Shadow sometimes shows up in Commander, but usually Shadow translates to just unblockable. So instant speed, single blue, creature becomes unblockable and draw a card. Seems good. This is almost a strict upgrade to Leap. So yeah, I guess not really an upgrade since Stronghold came out after Tempest, but yeah, you know how it is. Next up is Slip Through Space. This is a single blue for a sorcery with Devoid, which will not matter, probably, but Devoid just means that Slip Through Space has no color, which means it looks like a blue spell, but it technically isn't a blue spell because it's Devoid. So if someone tries to Pyroblast this, they can't because Pyroblast only affects blue spells, and this is not blue. You get it. Devoid doesn't usually come up, but it's on here. And it just says target creature can't be blocked this turn, draw a card. So another one of these. Pretty good. Next is Crypsis. This is from original Born of the Gods, the original Theros block. 1 and a blue for an instant that says target creature you control gains protection from creatures your opponents control until end of turn, and untap it. So no pump here, but it does untap, and it gets protection from creatures. Protection from creatures your opponents control, that is. Meaning it can't be blocked, damaged, targeted by any of those creatures. It also can't have anything attached from creatures. Not really a thing that happens. So yeah, Crypsis seems very good. And the fact that we untap it means we could use this after Muddle attacks. We just would need to trigger Muddle and make it into a copy of something else, and also give it Myriad with some other spell if we want Muddle to be able to make copies. Otherwise, we have to use Crypsis in order to Crypsis ahead of time to make Muddle, to turn Muddle's ability on. So yeah. But we can sort of simulate vigilance with this. But at the very least, we protect our commander quite well and give it unblockable. Next up is Water Wings. This is from Wilds of Eldraine. There's several different versions of this effect. This is just the one that I think is best. 1 and a blue for an instant that says, until end of turn, target creature you control has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains flying and hexproof. So, interestingly, the way this works is if we have Starwinder in play, the 7/7, and we cast Water Wings targeting our commander. What will happen is our commander will trigger, we make it into a copy of Starwinder, and now Water Wings resolves, and it becomes base power and toughness 4/4 against flying and hexproof. So it is still a Starwinder, but its power and toughness changes to 4/4. So a lot of times, Water Wings is best if we pair it with Muddle becoming a copy of something that has power and toughness less than 4/4. If it is 4/4, or if it's bigger than 4/4, we are shrinking it. So that's okay. But it's nice to be able to see that as a way of possibly, not always, but somewhat pumping our commander. But particularly at instant speed, we can give Evasion, that's flying, and we can use this to give hexproof, which is a great way to protect our commander. Yeah, I do want to make mention of this. I guess I could have mentioned this earlier. Muddle triggers whenever we cast an instant or sorcery. Doesn't even have to target Muddle. We just have a lot of things in this deck that we are intending to target Muddle with. But we could hit an opponent's creature with this, make it so that opponent's creature is protected. Maybe we do this as a political thing to make a deal with an opponent. We could use this on a different one of our creatures. We could even use this on one of our myriad tokens. Yeah. Next up, you come to a river from Adventures in Forgotten Realms. This is 1 and a blue for an instant that says we choose to either fight the current, meaning we return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. It does not say that you don't control, so we can use this to protect Muddle by bouncing Muddle to our hand. We can use this to bounce one of our own other things, or bounce any of our opponent's stuff, thereby giving us a little bit of evasion, since that thing can't block anymore if it was a creature, and also triggering Muddle in the process. Or we can find a crossing. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. Pretty good. We've seen the Encouraging Aviator. It gives us the ability to cast Jump probably over and over in this deck. Just a single blue for an instant that gives flying. Pretty good. And we've seen Subterfuge, which when it enters can give something flying and its own version of like Better Curiosity, which will be relevant to us for our commander, because if we have our commander as a copy of Subterfuge, we attack with our commander, we get extra copies of Subterfuge, those myriad copies, one of which can trigger our command, or can target our commander, I should say, with this ability, and now our commander has evasion. So everything in this evasion section, as you can see, is an instant or sorcery, including Jump as the prepare spell on the Encouraging Aviator, with the exception of Subterfuge, which gives flying as part of its interest trigger. So yeah, that covers all of our evasion spells, and sort of the lion's share of our game plan. We have an awful lot of spells in this deck in our other sections that we're going to get to in a moment. But before we do you maybe feel like liking the video? You don't have to, but I would appreciate it. But in all honesty, I appreciate you being here with me either way. Thanks for joining me. So, before we go on to the other supplemental sections of our game plan, I want to talk about these sections that support our game plan. We're going to begin with our card advantage section. We've got a lot of cards in this section that do other things, but also draw us cards. Again, I just use the word draw as a tag to represent card advantage. It doesn't mean all of these cards do the draw card action, but many of them do. So Enter the Enigma, Leap, we've already seen both of these. They're an evasion spell that also draws us a card. Preordain is a classic, single blue for sorcery, scry 2 and then draw 1. It's not instant speed like Opt, but it scries us an extra card, so might as well. Pim Particles is another evasion spell that draws us a card, as is Shadow Rift, as is Slip Through Space. We've seen the Dour Port Mage. It draws us cards every time we have one or more of our creatures leave the battlefield without dying. Expressive Iteration is a great one from original Strixhaven. This is a blue and a red for a sorcery that says look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 in your hand, 1 on the bottom of your library, and exile one of them, and you can play the exiled card this turn. So if you were not playing in Standard when this was in Standard, the way this normally plays is you look at the top 3, you figure out which one you want least, and you plan to make that the second one, the one that goes on the bottom of your library. If you have not made your land drop this turn, which is what you kind of want to do with this, you want to play this as your first spell on turn 3 so that you can get a land. If you find a land among them, you make that the card that goes to exile, because you can play that card this turn, including your land drop. So the idea is, hopefully you find a land, you make that the card you're going to play. Of the other 2, you put the one you like most into your hand, and the other one goes on the bottom of your library. So you're seeing 3 cards and kind of getting to touch 2. That's pretty good. Next up, we have a newer one from Secrets of Strixhaven called Flow State. This is 1 and a blue for a sorcery that says look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand, and the rest on the bottom in any order. But if there's an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard, instead, put 2 in your hand and the rest on the bottom in any order. So the idea here is, as long as this isn't the first instant or sorcery you've cast, as long as you have any instants or sorceries in your graveyard, this is 2 mana, look at 3, put 2 in your hand. Otherwise, it's 2 mana, look at 3, put 1 in your hand. 2 mana to draw a card is fine. 2 mana to draw 2 cards is amazing. So yeah, Flow State can be really great for us. And remember, all of these that we've seen so far, with the exception of like Dour Port Mage, also trigger our commander. Idol of Oblivion, we can tap to draw a card every time we've made a token in that same turn. Into the Royal is next. This is it's a 1 and a blue for an instant with kicker 1 and a blue. So we can either pay 1 and a blue or 2 and double blue for this. And if we do, we return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and if it was kicked, we draw a card. So this is really just a classic bounce spell. We can use it to protect ourselves, we can use it to remove something, protect our commander, that is. We can remove something our opponent has, we can draw a card off it as well. I love Into the Royal. I loved it when it was Blink of an Eye in original Dominaria. Yeah, just being able to use this in so many different ways, it's just very powerful for us. Sonar Unfinished Genius. This is one of the very few legendary creatures we have in the deck that isn't our commander. Sonar is another prepare creature. Sonar is a blue and a red for an 0/4 legendary goblin sorcerer who enters prepared. So Sonar is only going to get to use his ability once unless we have some way to have him die and come back, or like bounce him somehow, which we can bounce some of our creatures. We saw Into the Royal just a moment ago. But typically, Sonar is an 0/4 that if we tap, we can make a treasure token, but only if we've cast an instant or sorcery this turn. So really, much like our Idol of Oblivion being, did you make a token this turn? Well, tap it, draw a card. Sonar is essentially in this deck as a solid blocker that says, did you cast an instant or sorcery this turn? Well, tap him to make a treasure. Pretty great. Not a great blocker if he's tapped, but we could have cast an instant on an opponent's turn, and we can block at least until that point. So repeatable treasures are pretty great. But Sonar enters prepared, which means while Sonar is in play and prepared, we can cast Wild Idea, a sorcery for 3 blue and a red that lets us search our library for an instant or sorcery, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. It's just a tutor for an instant or sorcery. I don't love tutors, but this is a solid one, especially for 5 mana. We find the thing that we need most out of all the instants and sorcery cards in our library, and we're all set. Sonar gives us that and just keeps making treasures for us. Good guy. Next up, we've seen the Silent Hall Creeper. Lets us draw a card when it deals combat damage, whether it's itself, whether it's Muddle, or whether it's one of those token myriad copies of Muddle. Pearl of Wisdom is next. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery that costs 1 less to cast if we control an otter. Our commander is, among other things, an otter. Our commander is an elemental otter shapeshifter. So even though we could cast Pearl of Wisdom, which would trigger Muddle, and Muddle would become something that isn't an otter, in order to have cast Pearl of Wisdom, we've already paid its casting cost to put it on the stack, which means it got that discount while Muddle was an otter. So this is actually cheaper for us to cast when we're triggering Muddle than it is to cast after we've triggered Muddle. Kind of interesting. And then it lets us draw 2 cards. So it's still essentially 1 and a blue to draw 2 and trigger our commander. Seems good. Next up, Seize the Spoils. Love this card. 2 and a red for a sorcery with an additional cost of discarding a card, and it lets us draw 2 and make a treasure. So it's Tormenting Voice that costs 1 more, but gives us a rebate on that 1 more in the form of a treasure token that we can use now or later. Great. This is a really cool effect. I included this one rather than all of the 4 mana versions because I wanted our curve to be a little nicer. And Seize the Spoils is solid. Being able to essentially have 2 cards replace themselves. We lose the discarded card and Seize the Spoils. We get 2 back. Plus we get a treasure. Just very useful to us. But we did have 1 slot for one of the 4-drop versions of this, and I chose the most powerful one that's also my favorite, which is Big Score. Big Score is the same as Seize the Spoils, but with 3 changes. Costs 1 more, it's instant speed, and it makes 2 treasures. So 3 and a red as an additional cost, discard a card for this instant to draw us 2 and make 2 treasures. Great. Love this card. Being able to get treasures is great in our deck. We trigger our commander, we can do this on our opponent's turn at instant speed, whatever we need. Love it. Deep Analysis is also very good. 3 and a blue for a sorcery that has target player draw 2 cards. We can use this politically if we want. Target player. Usually it's us though. 4 mana to draw 2 is a little higher rate than what we're used to, but we can also flash this back for 1 and a blue and pay 3 life. So 2 mana and 3 life to draw 2 cards is very nice, especially since we have a few ways, as you've already seen, to discard our cards. Even if it's something like Seize the Spoils or Big Score, we can discard Deep Analysis and we haven't lost out on this card. It's just in our graveyard and we can just cast it with flashback. Sure. Next up, we've seen Parapet Thrasher. It gives us the ability to exile the top card of our library when one or more dragons we control do combat damage to an opponent, and we can play that card this turn. Seems good. Subterfuge lets us choose a creature, give it flying, and make it so we can draw a number of cards equal to the amount of damage it does when it does combat damage this turn. Anti-Causal Vestige. When it leaves the battlefield, we draw a card, and we can put a permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. So at least it draws us a card. Combustible Gearhulk might draw us 3 cards, or might have us mill 3 and do damage equal to the total mana value of those cards to the player who made that choice. Meringue River Regent, it's got its Coil and Catch instant, draw 3 and discard 1. Season of Weaving, we'll talk about that in a moment. Trumpeting Carnosaur, when it enters we discover 5, that's us finding a free spell, maybe putting it in our hand or maybe casting it. And of course Starwinder has this crazy effect that draws us so many cards, just seems like a lot of fun. But Season of Weaving is the last in this section. 4 and double blue for a sorcery that lets us choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes, and we can choose the same mode more than once. We could draw 5 cards, just make that all 5 of the paw prints we're spending. For 2, we can choose an artifact or creature we control and make a token that's a copy of it, and for 3, we can return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. So this is a Wrath. It doesn't hit lands, and it doesn't hit tokens, but it hits everything else, and that's pretty solid. However, if we combine that with this second ability, something that's notable is these all resolve in order. So if we make a copy of our commander with this, wouldn't the legend rule cause it to die? Apparently it doesn't. Because with Season of Weaving, we make this copy and then we bounce everything, and the legend rule is a state-based action. We check to see if we have 2 permanents that share a name and are both legendary when state-based actions are checked, which does not happen in the middle of the resolution of a spell. So if we wanted to, we could bounce everything, including Muddle, after having made a copy of Muddle. Now that copy is not our commander, it's a copy of our commander, and we won't be able to do commander damage with it, but it will still be in play, and that seems pretty cool. So yeah, being able to use Season of Weaving, it's not likely that we're using this to trigger our commander if we're choosing this ability, because if we were to, we would be triggering our commander and then bouncing it immediately. But it's nice to be able to have this as the option for a Wrath, even if we leave something behind. We might leave behind a token copy of our Soul Ring. That's a possibility. We can use that to recast the original Soul Ring right away. Or, since we can do artifacts with it, of course, or token copy of one of our creatures, whatever we need. But making a copy of something and also drawing 3 cards seems pretty nice. Drawing a couple of cards and bouncing so many things seems good. Or we could just draw a whole bunch of cards. Yeah, Season of Weaving is solid for us. That covers our card advantage section. Let's go now to our acceleration, which as usual I've just tagged as a shorthand, which is ramp. Of course we're running Soul Ring. This is a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. It's extremely powerful. Of course we're going to run this in our deck, so put it in yours. Strike It Rich is next. This is a single red for a sorcery that makes a treasure, and we can flash it back for 2 and a red. So a really easy way for us to trigger our commander and get our mana right back from it, and then we can flash it back later if we need to trigger our commander again, and we get a rebate on that. Love it. Wayfarer's Bauble. This is 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we get to Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So it is the same mana cost as Rampant Growth itself, but with our mana completely fixed, since it only asks for generic. The only downside to this is it costs us 1 to put it on the battlefield in the first place, but it doesn't have to be in the same turn. We could turn 1 Wayfarer's Bauble, turn 2 crack it, and we've Rampant Growthed at the same time that a green player would have, and we're in Izzet colors doing that. Love it. We're also running Arcane Signet. It's an untapped mana rock for 2 that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, blue or red. A 2 mana untapped rock that makes both of our colors. Of course we're running this. Izzet Signet is also a 2 mana untapped rock that makes both our colors, but it's not quite as good as the Arcane Signet. It requires us to pay mana into it and tap it in order to make 2 mana. So we're tapping 2 sources, whatever we're tapping for this one and the Signet itself, to get 2 mana. So it filters our mana. These are called Signets. These are very solid. It's a great use for our mana for accelerating ourselves. We've seen Sonar. Sonar lets us tap Sonar every turn we've cast an instant or sorcery to make a treasure. Talisman of Creativity is another untapped 2-mana rock. For 2, we get an artifact that taps for colorless. Or we can tap it for blue or red if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. The way I normally like to talk about these talismans is this. If somebody said, would you be willing to pay a life in order to cast 1 extra spell during your turn? You would say yes every time. You would do this 6, 7, or 8 times during the game, because that's 6, 7, or 8 more spells you would have cast than if you hadn't. Well, that's what Talisman of Creativity does. It says, do you need colored mana? No? Well, then just tap me for colorless. But if you need colored mana, meaning it's the difference between you casting a spell or not, then pay the life. You get an extra spell. That's very, very strong. These are pain lands on an artifact. You can tap them all day. It's great. Yeah, love these talismans. Bender's Waterskin. This is a card that I thought, when it was printed in the Avatar: The Last Airbender set, was going to go into so many decks because it's probably my favorite Manolith, or one of them at least. Manolith being a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. The problem is, it doesn't come up except if you have a deck that includes a lot of repeatable, like activated abilities that require mana cost, or a lot of instants. And we have a good number of instants in this deck, so we might as well use this as the deck's Manolith. But yeah, it just taps for 1 mana of any color, and we can untap it during each other player's untap step. So every turn, this is untapped, so we have access to extra mana during our opponent's turns. If we need to cast one of our many instants, many of which are 2 mana or less, Bender's Waterskin gives us access to that extra mana. Might as well. We've also got 5 cards that we've already seen. Seize the Spoils and Big Score both make treasures. Stormkiln Artist makes treasures when we have our Magecraft trigger go off. Goldlust Triad makes treasures when it, or one of its myriad copies, deals combat damage to a player. And Anticausal Vestige does accelerate us because we can put lands into play from its Leave the Battlefield trigger. Even though they're tapped, that's still pretty good. So that covers our acceleration section. Let's go now to our interaction, which as usual I've just tagged as removal. So we've seen Jailbreak Scheme. It can bounce an artifact or creature, or rather not bounce it, but tuck it by putting it at top or bottom of its owner's library, their choice. We're in a red deck, so of course we're running Lightning Bolt. It's a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. Any target. This card is incredible. It was in alpha, it's still incredibly strong. If you're running red, put Lightning Bolt in your deck. Rapid Hybridization is next. This is a single blue for an instant that destroys a creature. That creature can't be regenerated. Maybe that would be relevant. And that creature's controller makes a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. This is Pongify, but cheaper. So yeah, seems very good. And again, we're targeting a different creature, killing it, giving that creature's controller a frog lizard, and we're triggering our commander in the process. We've seen Into the Royal. It lets us bounce one of our things or one of our opponent's things as long as it's not a land. And if we kick it, we get to draw a card too. You Come to a River also lets us bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Imprisoned in the Moon is 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker and makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and causes it to lose all other card types and abilities. So this card is very strong. Yes, we can shut down planeswalkers, or we can shut down, I don't know, a bounce land, let's say, so it no longer taps for 2 mana, it taps for 1 colorless. But usually Imprisoned in the Moon is meant to shut down a big, dangerous creature or a commander. Because if we are able to target someone's commander with this, and they don't have a way to stop it from resolving, or interact with their own lands or with enchantments, then their commander is just a land. Yeah, we've accelerated them a little bit by giving them the ability to tap for mana with that card, but they can't use it for any of the engine reasons that they might have put it in the deck in the first place. So until they can either make a deal with someone in order to make that someone deal with their own commander, like free their commander from Imprisoned to the Moon, or until they draw their own enchantment removal or enchantment bounce or whatever it may be, it's just locked down. So this is a great answer to commanders that are making their deck just very aggressive and powerful in a way that might make our deck sort of fold to it. So this can be a tempo piece, but yeah, it's just very strong removal in those ways. Next up, we've seen Parapet Thrasher. It can destroy an artifact that an opponent controls. Pyrogoyf can do a whole bunch of damage, especially when there are other Pyrogoyfs entering, to any target. So that's burn to our opponents and straight removal to our opponent's creatures. Sleep is next. This is 2 and double blue for a sorcery that taps all creatures target player controls, and those creatures don't untap during that player's next untapped step. So normally I like to think of tapping an opponent's creatures as an evasion effect, because it taps them down so they can't block. But being able to tap them down and make them unable to untap for a turn cycle, that's removal. It's not permanent removal any more than, phasing something out would be, but being able to, or like bouncing it since it can come back, but being able to say, all your stuff is tapped down, you can't attack me with it, you can't block me, nor can you block anyone else who wants to attack you this turn cycle, unless on your turn you play new creatures. This can just kill a person, especially for us when we want to use it to tap down an opponent's whole board, triggering Muddle, making Muddle into something else so that we can attack with Muddle and swing in and not be blocked and therefore not lose Muddle in the process. Just seems very powerful. And then we say to our other opponents, you can attack me if you want, but that player whose creatures are all asleep is wide open. The others we've seen, Illithid Harvester, for the same reason as I just mentioned for sleep. We tap down an opponent's creatures with plant tadpoles, they don't untap, and we can also remove them in the sense of humbling them by making them into face-down 2/2 horrors with no abilities. Morang River Regent lets us bounce 2 non-land permanents when it enters, seems good, and Trumpeting Carnosaur can be channeled for 2 and a red and discard it to do 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. And that covers our interaction section. We are running 2 Wraths. We've seen Season of Weaving already. Gives us the ability to bounce all non-land, non-token permanents. But we also have River's Rebuke, which is sort of a bigger version of Sleep in a way. For 4 and double blue, we have a sorcery that returns all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. Bounce everything you have except for lands. When you do that, Muddle's going to trigger. We're going to make Muddle into the best version of whatever we have. We're going to attack you so you can't block us. We're going to get myriad copies that'll attack other opponents. Maybe we just put one of those opponents' things to sleep. Maybe we spent 6 mana or 10 mana this turn. So yeah, River's Rebuke is a fun one and recently reprinted in Foundations, so inexpensive. And that covers our deck's support sections. We're going to go through a few more sections now that supplement our game plan, starting with our tokens section. These are all cards that make tokens for us, some of which we might want to copy with Muddle, but in any case, they supplement the 20 creature count in our deck by adding more creatures for us. We're going to start with Firebender Ascension from Avatar: The Last Airbender, of course. 1 and a red for an enchantment that gives us, when it enters, we make a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. Firebending 1 just means that when that soldier attacks, we get a single red mana in our pool that doesn't leave our pool until we either spend it or until combat is over. So yeah, I didn't add this to our acceleration section because we don't have a dependable way to keep using that, but if you were to want to copy that with Muddle, sure, you'll get some 2/2 soldier myriad tokens. They will not trigger Firebending since they enter tapped and attacking, and in order to get that one, you need to actually declare it as an attacker, but you will get it from Muddle, so yeah, that's a thing. However, the reason this is actually in the deck is whenever a creature we control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. Quest counters are not actually, they don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by the card that they're on. And then, if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we can copy that ability and we can choose new targets for the copy. So that's great for these red soldier tokens. The one token that we have, once we get 4 quest counters, we're going to be able to make 2 red mana. That seems powerful, right? But not as powerful as doubling Muddle's Myriad trigger. So Firebender Ascension is another way to have our Myriad triggers go off more. That's what we're looking for with this. So every time we attack with something that has an attack trigger, we're going to get counters on this, which gives us a reason to attack with this soldier token, even if it's going to die, because it means 1 more quest counter on Firebender Ascension and 1 more step closer to being able to double Muddle's Myriad triggers once it's got those 4 counters on it. Idol of Oblivion can be sacrificed for that 10/10 Eldrazi. It's a token. Cackling Counterpart is 1 and double blue for an instant that makes a token that's a copy of target creature we control, and we can flash it back for 5 and double blue. So that's quite expensive to flash it back, but only 3 mana to make a copy of something. That's pretty sweet. At instant speed, we have a sudden surprise blocker. Pretty good. Quasi-duplicate is sorcery speed for the same cost, 1 and double blue, to make a token that's a copy of target creature we control, and we can jumpstart it. So it flashes back for the same cost and an additional cost of us discarding a card. So not as fast as Cackling Counterpart, but much cheaper to recur and cast again. Pretty good. Redoubled Stormsinger, also, like with Firebender Ascension, once it has enough quest counters, essentially doubles our tokens if we stack the triggers properly once we attack with Muddle. Yeah, it can also make those tokens if we've made tokens in other ways, like, for example, it attacks or Muddle as it attacks. In the same turn we've cast Firebender Ascension, we're going to get that attack trigger, and we're going to get to make a copy of that Red Soldier token that came in, since that did enter this turn. Nice. We've seen Rite of Replication. It has a great way to make us a copy of any creature on the battlefield, or if we kick it, 5 of those creatures. Goldlust Triad has Myriad, so it makes token copies of itself. Echo Casting Symposium is next. This is a new one from Secrets of Strixhaven. It's 4 and double blue for a sorcery lesson that says target player creates a token that's a copy of target creature you control. So we can even give a player a creature that we control and give it to a player that's not us. Why would we do that? We can, though. Sure, why not? Because we don't need to. We want to give copies of our own creatures to ourselves. But Echo Casting Symposium has Paradigm, which means as we cast it, once it makes that copy, we exile it. And after we resolve a spell with this name, we can cast a copy of it from exile without paying its mana cost at the beginning of each of our first main phases. What all that means is we get a free Echo Casting Symposium casting at the start of our first main phase every subsequent turn after we've cast this for the first time. Even if somehow this doesn't stay in exile. It's a crazy ability. It's worth looking up if you want to know how this works. But essentially, we are not making a copy of this on the stack. We are making a copy of it in exile and casting that, which means we are casting a spell that is a sorcery, which means at the start of our first main phase, every turn, we're triggering Muddle, making a copy of something and making Muddle into a copy of something. Very, very cool. It's 6 mana, but it gives us a free spell every turn and a free new creature every turn, assuming we have any creatures in play that are not themselves legendary. Great. And we've seen our last 2. Season of Weaving can make maybe a copy of an artifact or a copy of a creature, or maybe 2 of them if we want to choose it twice and then draw a card as well. And Mirror Battlesphere comes in and makes 4 colorless mirror artifact creature tokens when it enters. That covers our tokens section. Let's go now to our payoffs. These are all cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway. Idol of Oblivion, for example, draws us a card when we tap it, assuming we've already made a token this turn. We're going to be making a lot of tokens in this deck. Sonar rewards us by letting us tap it to make a treasure if we've already cast an instant or sorcery. We're going to do a lot of that too. They actually work pretty well together, in fact. Let's say we cast an instant or sorcery, then we can tap Sonar to make a treasure token. Then, since we've made a token, since this doesn't specify creature tokens, we can tap Idol of Oblivion to also draw a card. A team. Very nice. Redoubled Stormsinger, when it attacks, or when, of course, a copy of it attacks, like Muddle as a copy of it, if we've already made creature tokens this turn, we get a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of each of those. And of course, like I mentioned before, we can stack Muddle's Myriad trigger so that we've made those tokens, and then Redoubled Stormsinger gets us copies of those tokens as well. Great. Stormkiln Artist has a Magecraft trigger, makes us a treasure when we cast or copy an instant or sorcery. Very nice. Renegade Bull cares about us casting instants and sorceries because it gets a power boost equal to the mana value of any of those spells. And Octavia Living Thesis is 8 and double blue, so a 10 mana card for an 8/8 legendary elemental octopus. This is the other non-Sonar, non-Muddle legendary creature in the deck. Octavia costs 8 generic less to cast if we have 8 or more instants and or sorceries in our graveyard, meaning Octavia could be an 8/8 for double blue, which if we get her later in the game, she will be. Very nice. And she has Ward 8, which is essentially hexproof. Very cool. She also has Magecraft. When we cast or copy an instant or sorcery, target creature has base power and toughness 8/8 until end of turn. So think about making Muddle into an 8/8. We want to make Muddle into an 8/8 with this trigger, But we also want to make sure we stack our triggers properly. So if Muddle is just Muddle, and then we cast instant or sorcery, and we have an Octavia trigger and a Muddle trigger, we want to have Muddle become a copy of another creature, not Octavia, of course, because Octavia is legendary, first, and then have Octavia's Magecraft trigger resolve second, so that whatever Muddle has become, its power and toughness is overwritten to be an 8/8. Notably, this is not a copyable value, so when Muddle attacks, its myriad copies will not be 8/8s, they will be whatever the creature that Muddle originally copied was. But still, it makes Muddle into an 8/8, and that's still pretty big. And if we cast additional instants and sorceries on that turn, we could then make those myriad tokens, or anything else, into 8/8s as well. That covers our payoffs section. Let's go now to our protection. We have, oh, it's right here. Very nice. So we've got a number of cards that we can use to protect us or our stuff. Crypsis, of course, lets us give one of our creatures protection from creatures that our opponents control until end of turn. Pretty good. Dour Portmage we can use to bounce one of our creatures back to our hand. That prevents us from having to recast our commander with the commander tax, or prevents one of our other creatures from maybe being exiled or destroyed, so we can just rebuy it. Into the Royal can bounce a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That can include us. The same is true if you come to a river. We can, in the same way that we do with Dour Portmage, protect our creatures that way. Water Wings can give hexproof in addition to flying and base power and toughness 4/4 to target creature. Hexproof is pretty good. For that same reason, we have Swiftfoot Boots. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives hexproof and haste to the equipped creature. Haste could be very powerful in our deck, but usually we're putting this on Muddle to give it hexproof. Being able to protect our creature, our commander, all the time from targeted removal seems good to me. We also have Return the Favor in this deck. Return the Favor is another spree card. It's double red and for an instant that requires us to spend at least 1 more, maybe 2 more if we want both effects. If we spend just 1, we get to copy target instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and we can choose new targets for the copy. So this is pretty sweet. We don't want to copy Muddle's triggered ability. We want to copy Muddle's myriad triggered ability. Once Muddle has already become the copy of something else, we can attack with Muddle, and then with that myriad trigger on the stack, we make a copy of it, so we get double the Muddle triggers. Again, same thing we saw before. But we can also copy any instant sorcery, activated ability, or triggered ability. We can copy one of our clone effects. If we happen to have 12 mana, we can copy a kicked version of Rite of Replication and get a total of 10 copies of something. We can copy our opponent's stuff. We can copy their activated or triggered abilities. Being able to see someone, I mean, it could be as simple as we're going to pay 5 mana by cracking our Wayfarer's Bauble and then copying its triggered ability to Rampant Growth twice. But again, I keep giving examples out of the cards in our deck because those are the cards that we've seen today. But we can copy anything ability-wise or instant or sorcery-wise at the table whenever we need to. Great. And that's for 3 mana, or we can spend 1 and change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. This can be really great as a way to protect ourselves. That's why it's in this section. And if we want to, we could always, if somebody has a spell or ability that's targeting one of our things, we could pay double red and 2 to change the target of that to be, let's say it's a removal spell, to hit one of their creatures and then copy it and hit a different one of their creatures as well. So for 4 mana, we're protecting our creature and getting rid of 2 of theirs and making it so their own spell is not being used for our things anymore. So it's essentially a 3-for-1. Pretty good. That covers our protection section. Let's go now to all the things we have that can pump up our creatures. Oh, it's right here again. So we've got a number of different ways to do this, and I believe we've seen all of them. Distortion Strike, +1/+0, in addition to Unblockable. Jailbreak Scheme, +1/+1 counter. In addition to Unblockable. Maximize Altitude, just +1/+1, and plus Flying. Silent Hall Creeper is in this section because it can put 2 counters on itself, and if Muddle becomes a copy of it, then that's 2 counters on Muddle, so that's pretty good. Water Wings can change the base power and toughness to 4/4. Octavia can change it to 8/8. You Come to a River can give +1/+0 in addition to Unblockable, just like Distortion Strike. And Mere Battlesphere gives a bonus to itself, which could be to Muddle as well, equal to the number of mirror that we tap when we attack with it, or when we attack with Muddle when it's a copy of it, in addition to doing that amount of damage directly to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So very weak in the sense of this actually being a pump effect, but since our commander's copying our things, it could sure count. Because, notably, it requires us to tap any number of untapped mirror we control. They don't have to lack summoning sickness. So normally with the Battle Sphere, if we attack with it, we're tapping the 4 mirror that it made for us. But if this comes in and we cast a spell to make Muddle into a copy of the Battle Sphere, we can tap the 4 mirror and the Battle Sphere itself, because it is also a mirror, giving Muddle, as the mirror Battle Sphere, +5/+0 and doing 5 damage to their player or planeswalker Muddle is attacking, and so now it's attacking as a 9/7. In addition to getting its Myriad trigger and getting more of those mirror into play, all of which we could tap as well. So we're tapping, what is that, a total of 13 things if we wanted to get a 13 damage and make this into a 17/7? Yeah, very good. Just crazy fun things you could do with that. So that's our pump section. Let's look at all the different ways we have for recursion here. I think we've seen all of these. Probably yes. These are all ways to get back either the spell itself or some of our other spells. So Artful Dodge and Defy Gravity both have flashback. Distortion Strike has rebound, so it doesn't just come back. It doesn't come back from the graveyard. It comes back from the exile zone that it puts itself in after we cast it the first time. Maximize Altitude has Jumpstart, as does Quasi Duplicate. Strike It Rich and Cackling Counterpart and Deep Analysis all have flashback. Renegade Bull can let us flashback an instant or sorcery when it attacks. Subterfuge brings itself back in the form of multiple token copies once, in the form of its Encore ability. And Echocasting Symposium has Paradigm, so we can recast a copy of it every turn at the start of our first main phase. Nice. That is our recursion section. We have a bit of burn. We've seen all of these. Lightning Bolt, the most efficient and powerful version of burn that we have, can hit anything, including our opponents. Parapet Thrasher can trigger and have dragons deal 4 damage to each other opponent once they do damage, or once they see other dragons do damage. Pyrogoyf, we've talked about Pyrogoyf being not quite as complicated as Parapet Thrasher when we have multiple copies of it, but a lot of damage based on the power of each Lurgoyf that enters to any target. Combustible Gearhulk, for the opponent we choose, they can have us draw 3, or we can mill 3, and they'll take direct damage equal to the total mana value of the cards we milled. And like we just talked about, Mirror Battlesphere, when it attacks, or when our commander as the Mirror Battlesphere attacks, we get to do direct damage to the player or planeswalker we're attacking equal to the number of mirror we tap as part of its attack trigger, plus a bonus to its power equal to the same amount. Nice. That is our burn section. I just want to point out that we have this synergy section. There are more cards in our considering section that fit in here, and I guess I could have put Return the Favor or our Recaster in here if we wanted to, but Firebender Ascension is the most pure version of this in that it will give us the ability to trigger our attack triggers a second time once we have 4 or more quest counters on it. So yeah, that's our synergy section. And that covers all of the spells in our library. Let's go to our lands now. As usual, we're going to start with the basics. We have 19 basic lands. We're running 11 islands and 8 mountains. We actually have a larger percentage of blue spells to red spells than this, but this works out just fine for us. I never want to be in a situation where we can't cast our minority spells, so I tend to err toward, pushing the proportion together a little bit rather than matching it exactly perfectly to what we have in the deck. And this, in my testing, has worked out pretty well. We're running Coastal Peak. It's a bicycle land, which is to say it is an island mountain. It is a dual-typed land that therefore taps for blue or red. It comes in tapped, or we can cycle it for 2 generic, meaning we can discard it from our hand for 2 and just draw a card. Something we might do late in our game if we no longer need any more lands. We have maybe plenty of mana we're making, or if it's early game and we're desperate for a card, we can always cycle away the Coastal Peak. But it's an island and a mountain, and that's pretty good for us. Because we have a Sulphur Falls in our deck. This is a land that taps for blue or red, and enters tapped unless we control an island or a mountain. It does not say basic island or mountain. So even though we do have 19 basics, we also have Coastal Peak, which is an island or a mountain. We have a Tango land in this deck as well. Those are our only 2 dual-typed lands, which means Sulphur Falls is going to come in untapped for 21 of the different lands in our deck, if any of those are in play. So this is very likely to come in as an untapped duel. Pretty good. If you were to want to upgrade Coastal Peak, though, you could go for Steam Fence. It's a much more expensive card, and it doesn't cycle, but it's a shock land, so it could definitely come in as an untapped duel as well. We're running both of the filter lands in our colors. Ferris Lake is a land that has the same text, essentially, as our Is It Signet. Pay 1 and tap to make a blue and red, so it filters our mana. We're also running Cascade Bluffs, which can tap for colorless mana on its own, or if we pay a blue or a red into it and tap it, we make double blue, double red, or one of each. So this is a lot more utility than our Ferris Lake, except if we don't have colored mana to put into this, then this can't produce colored mana. Whereas Ferris Lake, if we have any kind of mana to put into it, it can filter it into colored mana. So both of these cards have a space in our deck. We're running all 4 of these fixing lands here. Of course, we're running Command Tower. It's an untapped land that adds 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, blue or red. It's Arcane Signet as a land. Of course, we're running this as an untapped duel. We also have Path of Ancestry, which is a tapped duel. It's a tapped land with the same text as Command Tower, but it says when we spend its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we get to scry 1. So obviously, our commander shares types with itself. It is an elemental otter shapeshifter, so when we cast it with Path of Ancestry's mana, we get that scry. We also have 2 other elementals in this deck, but no other otters or shapeshifters. So this is a tap land, or a tapped dual land, which is totally fine for us. It gives us a little bit of additional value, especially when we use its mana on our commander or 2 other creatures. Not bad. We're running Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. So in this deck, 2 islands or 2 mountains. Then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. Those have to be basic lands, of course. So while this is slow, it's a tap land, it finds lands that come in tapped, and we have to pay to do so, well, it is 1 land drop that's turning into 2 lands in play for us, so it's a slow kind of acceleration, if you want to think of it that way. And it's not bad for our deck that doesn't have green in it, and therefore isn't able to accelerate itself as easily on its own. For similar reasons, not everyone loves Temple of the False God, but it's a land that taps for 2 colorless mana. It's a soul land, like Soul Ring. We just can't activate it unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so it's 5 or more, including itself. So even though this doesn't accelerate us when we most want it to, which is early game, it does jump us from making 4 mana to making 6 mana if this is our 5th land drop. So acceleration, early game is best, but mid game and late game don't hurt at all either. So this is totally fine for the kind of decks that I build for this channel. We're running Shivan Reef. It's a pain land. It is identical, except that it's a land, of course, to our Talisman of Creativity. Taps for colorless, taps for blue or red if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. Everything I said about the Talisman is just as true here. Yeah, it's a great untapped duel that we want. Frostboil Snarl is next. This is kind of like our check land we saw earlier, our Sulphur Falls. It's a land that taps for blue or red, and as it enters, we can reveal an island or mountain card from our hand, and if we don't, it comes in tapped. So that means either a basic island, a basic mountain, Sulphur Falls, or our Red-Blue Tango land. So a lot of chances of this coming in untapped, and if it comes in tapped, it's still a tapped duel, and that's fine for us. If you'd want to upgrade this, I would say the Riverpire Verge, one of the new Verge lands from Duskmourn and Aetherdrift. That would be a pretty sweet choice. It's very expensive right now since it's played in Standard, and it's in Is It Lessons and Is It Spelementals and several other big name Standard decks. But yeah, this is much cheaper, but if you wanted something a little more powerful and you happen to have one of those, that's an option for you. We're running a Scryland. It's Temple of Epiphany. This is a tap land, taps for both of our colors, and when it enters, we scry 1. So yeah, very simple, very inexpensive. It's in Foundations. Great to see the temples. If you want to upgrade this to the Surveil Land Thundering Falls, then yeah, that's another possibility. It would be a typed duel. That sounds great, but it's just much more expensive. We're running Stormcarved Coast. This is a slow land. It's a land that taps for our colors and enters tapped unless we control 2 or more other lands, which means any other lands, as long as this is not the first or second land we have in play, this is an untapped duel. Very, very strong for us. It's a great way to round out our check land and reveal land sort of suite of cards. Normally, these slow lands are what I would say you should upgrade your check land to, but the prices have dropped since they've reprinted these in the Secrets of Strixhaven main set, so great. Want to run Stormcarved Coast. I mentioned we have a Tango land. It is Scorched Geyser. This is, much like our Bicycle land, an island and mountain, so it taps for blue or red inherently, and it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So this is the same text as Stormcarved Coast, except it has the word basic in it. The coast comes in if we have 2 or more lands of any type. The geyser comes in if we have 2 or more basic lands. So this is a little more restrictive, but it has its own types as well, which is relevant for our Frostboreal Snarl, for our Sulphur Falls, and so forth. So we might as well run both. Love the Tango land. And again, if you wanted to upgrade the Tango land, you could of course do Steam Vents, the Shock land. Finally, we have these 6 utility lands in our deck. As opposed to Rogue's Passage, we're running Access Tunnel this time. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or if we pay 3 and tap it, target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. Our commander is a 3/3. So what's notable about this is, you might be saying, but Tobes, what if Muddle becomes something that's bigger than a 3/3? Well, as long as we've activated Access Tunnel, when Muddle is a legal target for Access Tunnel, it doesn't require Muddle to remain power 3 or less in order to have the effect of it. It just needs it to be power 3 or less when this effect resolves. It says if Muddle is a power 3 or less, when we target it, then that creature can't be blocked this turn. It doesn't matter if that creature's power changes later. So this is a cheaper version of Rogue's Passage, which normally hits any creature but requires 5 and tap to activate. So yeah, Access Tunnel, very good, particularly for our commander, especially if we're planning to use it anyway. We just activate it before we cast anything that would let Muddle become a copy of another creature. Then we cast that thing, let Muddle become another copy, attack, Muddle's unblockable, we don't have to worry about it. Demolition Field is next. What I normally say for this is, the kind of decks that I build for this channel are meant for a power level of table that usually involves people who don't want to see any kind of land destruction at all. They just don't want an experience of Magic where they're getting their mana denied to them, whether it's mass land destruction or not. And that's totally fine. Not everyone's looking for that. I'm not usually looking for that in Magic. But you do have to have an answer to certain lands that are non-basic and are problematic, like Rogue's Passage. If someone's running a Rogue's Passage and making their huge Voltron commander unblockable, then they're too much of a threat for that Rogue's Passage to be something you just leave in the play simply because it has the land type. Just like that, we want to do damage to our opponents, and if they're running a Glacial Chasm, then we can't do that damage to them as long as they're willing to pay that cumulative upkeep. So Demolition Field is the answer that is most sort of acceptable, I guess, for those kinds of tables. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we could pay 2, tap, and sack it, and destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and that opponent gets to then search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land, and we haven't lost out on any mana as long as we didn't destroy something that was making them multiple mana. Which, if we did, let's hope it was something like a Gaia's Cradle that was making them a huge amount of mana, rather than like a bounce land that they had to work hard to get a land that makes 2 mana for. Yeah, this is definitely usable in a way that's not great for those kinds of tables, sort of agreed Rule 0 vibe, but you want to have an answer to a threat, which is to say something that's either disempowering our game plan or empowering another player's game plan so much that it's no longer relevant or as relevant that it's a land. Demo Field is the best option I have for that. Hall of Oracles is next. This is a land that comes in untapped and taps for colorless. We can also pay 1 and tap it to make 1 mana of any color, so it filters land for us. And we can tap it and put a 1/1 counter on target creature, but only at sorcery speed if we've cast an instant or sorcery this turn. So in a way, even though we don't have to pay mana into this, it's sort of like saying we're tapping 1 extra mana, which is to say the hall itself, to every turn that we cast an instant or sorcery, make our commander a little bit bigger. Now that does make it hard for our commander to use Access Tunnel, but sometimes we just want our commander to be an extra counter bigger every single turn that we're casting instant sorceries. It's like we're adding kicker of 1 to a single instant or sorcery we cast every turn that puts a counter on our commander. So this can really be great, because remember, those counters add to our commander's power and toughness no matter what it's copying. So yeah, a pretty nice little bonus for us here. Lindblom, Industrial Regency, is a land that has an adventure. So normally this is a town. It comes in tapped, and it taps for red. But we can, if we want, cast it as an instant speed adventure called Mage Siege first. For 2 and a red, we make a 0/1 black wizard creature token that says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is a black mage token. It's a little bit of extra burn that's in our land base if we cast this first, and then maybe even the same turn, if we haven't made our land drop, we can play Lindblom, which is a tapped red source. Pretty nice for us. Or we can just play it as the land and never get that Mage Siege, But this is 1 more instant that's in our library that we can use to trigger our commander and have Muddle become a copy of something else we control. Great. We also have Mystic Sanctuary, which is an additional island for us. This is an island, so it taps for blue, and it enters tapped unless we control 3 or more other islands. Luckily, we have lots of islands in this deck, including our 2 dual-typed lands, which are islands. And when Mystic Sanctuary enters untapped, which means it's entering when we have at least 3 other islands in play, we can put an instant or sorcery from our graveyard on top of our library. This card is unbelievably strong, banned in certain formats. Very, very powerful as a way to get instants and sorceries back from our graveyard to be able to cast them again. It's 1 more piece of recursion for us. It is an island. It's just very, very strong. And it's in our land base. The cost of inclusion is so low. It's unbelievable to me. This is still just 60 cents on Mana Pool. And just for fun, we've got a creature land. It's Restless Spire. This is a tap land that taps for our 2 colors. And if we pay a blue and a red, until end of turn, this becomes a 2/1 blue and red elemental creature with, during your turn, this creature has first strike, it's still a land, and when it attacks, we scry 1. So a nice little bonus creature if we need it. Maybe if we are able to use its ability to attack as a 2/1 first striker on our turn, that seems pretty good. We can get a little scry off of it. Yeah, just a little bit of additional value for us when we have plenty of lands in our land base to handle our check lands and our reveal lands. The number that we require is already there, so we might as well have another tap land that just adds a little bit of fun for our deck and gives us a surprise creature. Nice. And that sums it up. Starting next week, I'll be releasing new Marvel Superheroes Commander decks every Thursday through mid-August when the Hobbit set drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or style of deck. Thanks for staying here with me with all these Secrets of Strixhaven decks. I had a blast with them. I love to be in a Universes Within set, so I'm glad you were able to be here with me. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live, consider joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic or becoming a member on this YouTube channel. And remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.